All right, Kate, you want to just get started, you think? Spend a couple minutes. People might roll in a little late, but.
Yeah, sweet. That sounds good. All right, well, first of all, guys, thanks for coming tonight. You know, Scott and I are super excited to host this and share kind of our experience so far with stuff out of state. I know we were talking about doing introductions first, so if we could just go around and everybody introduce themselves real quick and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Dylan, if you want to start for us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you want to stand up?
Yeah, that'd be perfect, just so people can hear you.
I'm a real estate agent here in Fairfield County. But that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 4 years. I just started dabbling in investing and different things like that. But yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Perfect.
How's it going, everyone? My name is John. I'm a civil engineer. I do utility mapping around Fresno. I kind of got into real estate investing as a way to supplement my income about end of 2019. I'm currently in escrow, a 4-unit property. And so we're hopefully closing sometime middle of next month. And then the next logical step, I think, for me would be to look out of state while I'm kind of getting my hands-on experience with managing them. So
Perfect. Congrats.
Thanks.
My name is Christina. I actually work in the medical field and in the behavioral health field. I help run a couple of programs in different corporations on both sides. I used to work with Scott, and I see how far he's come along, so I'm highly interested in that and kind of getting into it from that reason.
Christina worked with me at Cup of Joy, so I started there, and then I came into real estate. So she's actually followed up, and so happy you made it.
My name is Mark Rocha. My actual first introduction to real estate was investing. My previous job, I was using my W-2 wages to invest in real estate, picked up some properties, fell in love with real estate as a whole, and recently become a mortgage loan officer. So I've been doing that for about 3 months now. Looking to pick up some more, but out of state looks really nice. My brother started going to University of Dayton Law School. And I just looked at sales prices out there, and I said, Jesus, why am I still buying here? Why am I still buying here? So here I am to set that up.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
My name is Paul. I work for Gold Standard Mortgage, loan officer for about a year. I'm a licensed contractor and a real estate agent. So I've been in real estate investing for about 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple properties. I know Bailey, seen you on Instagram. I deal with Manjot on a couple deals. So
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, so
There we go. Awesome.
Sweet.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Brett Paul. I'm a Fresno State grad. Studied in finance over there. Graduated in 2015. After that, I went into banking, and right now I'm a relationship manager at Rabobank. So I primarily do ag lending. Always been interested in investing in multifamilies. Bought my first fourplex and closed in February this year. And looking around lately, and nothing's really cash flowing for me. So I think it'd be a perfect opportunity to learn more about out-of-state investing.
Perfect. Congrats.
I met Brett through an event at Fresno State. What was that? Probably over like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, Forks and Forks.
Yeah, there it is. It was Forks and Forks. So thanks for coming, Brett.
Yeah, perfect. Having me.
Hi guys, I'm Bailey. I'm part of the Clayton Group 2 real estate agent here at Keller Williams, and we are currently closing on our second rental in Indiana on Friday. So
Woo! There we go.
thank you.
Jason?
Hey guys, I'm Jason Pritchard. I work with Bailey and Kate and Scott on Clayton Group. I own about 70 units in town, and then I just bought a triplex in Cleveland, Ohio, and I've got a single family that I own out kind of where they're at. So
yeah,
interested to find out more about what they've got going on.
Perfect. And then just shout out, Jason is our team leader. Jason's done a lot for helping us on here, so give him a follow on Instagram. He's always putting out content, and good follow right there if you want education. Sweet.
Perfect.
You guys on Zoom, can you still hear us all right? Perfect. All right, perfect. We're gonna get started. So today we want to talk with you guys about out-of-state investing. It's not going to be a presentation. It's going to be a conversation. It's important that we keep it that way because I don't want this to be boring. So if you do have questions, if you're in Zoom, please type them out. We're going to keep watching. You guys in person, just let us know. Perfect.
Sweet. All right, so we've got our kind of table of contents for today. We're going to start with why invest out of state. We'll move to how to invest out of state, what to avoid, and then kind of the big meaty part of this will be our case study. We'll be talking about our first deal that we got out in South Bend. It was 4 single family residences in a package deal. Any questions at the end, but if you guys have anything in the meantime, feel free. And then the contact us page. So we'll get right into it.
Perfect. So you guys have kind of shared a little bit about why you're getting out of state. I heard a couple different people say cash flow, price, logical step from where you're at right now. Is there any other reasons that you guys are looking out of state? Just so we can make sure that if there's another thing we can talk about.
Same goes for you people in Zoom.
So we're going to talk about why we did it. Kate, if you want to switch to the next slide. Yep. This is super important because the reason why is what led us to do action. So Kate and I actually had this vision of going out of state, out in the parking lot right out there, deciding that we were kind of frustrated with what we were seeing with California and how California's legislation seems to be cracking down on landlords and kind of not taking them very seriously on as a business and something that needs to profit. So for us, that was the big reason why we left. We felt there was, hostile legislation and there was not a lot of help when it comes to, not a lot of help when it comes to protection for landlords when this is a business that's actually providing a really, really important service, which is, fair housing and, well-priced housing. Not everybody can afford a house. So we looked out of area because ultimately we decided there were other states that were going to protect us and we really wanted to work with them.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about South Bend. So the first thing we want to touch on is the price to rent ratio, which if you guys are not familiar, is the average home price divided by the average annualized rent. And what the price to rent ratio is actually a measure of is basically how strong the market is for, having rentals. So South Bend, right now, all of our homes, minus one, are all either 2-bedroom, 1 bath or 3-bedroom, 1 bath. So that average purchase price for those sits between $25,000 and $55,000, with respective monthly rents sitting between $600 and $800. So that gives us a 4.76 price to rent ratio.
Perfect. Jen, and if Jen has already seen this, but for anybody who's in the Zoom and anybody who's here today, we can get you guys in contact potentially with Jen. If you see anything that doesn't look right, please just call us out on it. But this was the numbers that we used when we purchased our properties. And so for the people that are saying that price is a big thing, to us, $25,000 or $55,000 for our future was completely worth it. And it was a lot more doable. I don't know if you guys can tell, we don't have hundreds of thousands sitting around at our age. So this was really important for the barrier to entry. We wanted to put Fresno on here because the general rule of thumb that we could find was that price to rent ratio under 15 is a good place to be.
Yeah.
So Fresno is not a bad place. And that's why somebody like Jason sitting in the back can have so many properties and still be making money on it because there's still ways to do it. What we're simply saying is this is a way that we found that we believe is potentially better and it fits what we're hoping to do. Because ultimately for us, we're hoping to invest out of state because we're not looking to stay in California maybe for our whole lives. And so it's great for us to not be tied down necessarily. Does that make sense? Perfect.
And then like I was touching on a little bit earlier, the general rule of thumb for the price to rent ratios is places with higher ratios usually do not offer as good of an investment opportunity. But like Scott was saying, we know even though Fresno is almost 10 points higher on the price to rent ratio, we know Fresno still works as a rental market. Line item number 2 on why we chose South Bend, Indiana was the economic stability. So as some of you may or may not know, South Bend is home to Notre Dame, so it's a big college town. They've got stable wages and stable employment through the college. A nearby city, Elkhart, is actually the RV manufacturing capital of the world. Mm-hmm. So we were actually talking with Jen a while back. There's 12,000 commuters that go back and forth between those two cities.
Daily.
So, yeah. So there's a lot of people coming in and out of South Bend, which provides a lot of good economic stability for the rental market.
Mm-hmm. Competition. This is something that was important that Kate and I didn't realize at first, but now we look at it as an opportunity for everybody in this room. What we don't realize is coming from California, we're in a high-paced, high-creative market where we have a lot of different full-time investors. We have a lot of people being close to some of the most expensive cities in the world helping pitch into this market. And so there's a lot of people who do this full-time and have managed to make a good living. In South Bend, we've noticed there's not nearly as many people because of both the size of the city and its proximity to big money. And so for maybe the regular people like us in this room who are interested in building a future and who have some money, but can't, fight these big trust funds, there's just not as much competition to fight against, and there's opportunity for us to get deals that maybe you couldn't get here just due to the amount of buyers. Does that make sense?
And then last thing we got on here for why out of state is our personal relationships. So as Jason mentioned, he was actually the first one in our sphere that we knew that actually had something in the Indiana area. So through our sphere, we were introduced to kind of his team that he used in order to acquire, manage, and everything that he's doing with that property out of state. So it was really important for us, and I think it was probably one of the most important deciding factors, was having that team kind of already in place, so to speak, out in South Bend. So we weren't going in blind with not knowing a property manager, not knowing any contractors, or not knowing anything. So this was a big piece for us.
Yeah. Has anybody in here done any research on any out of area markets? Can you tell us what markets you were looking at?
Ohio.
Ohio?
Dayton, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, that area right there. But that's only because, like I said, my brother he's going to school now.
Right.
That's the only reason I looked at it.
Right.
I started looking at things like, the population growth, job growth, and things like that.
Yeah.
Whether or not.
Yeah.
The prices are always going to look better than here because it's Midwest, but you also want to take that into account if it's not growing.
Yeah. Have you heard about this price to rent ratio?
Not that specific number, no.
Okay, yeah. So this is a tool that we actually did end up using. We were looking at 5 different markets throughout the country, including like Texas and Alabama, things like that. And we found that South Bend actually had the best price to rent ratio. And the big factor really was the lower price.
Yeah.
And so even though other cities, they had a lot of legislation we liked, they had different economic factors like population growth, economic stability, things like that. Really, one of the big things that helped us change was seeing the ratios here. We're both fairly analytical, and to us, it helped kind of get rid of the emotion. You mentioned you also were looking at one, maybe?
Yeah, in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Fayetteville?
Yeah.
How come?
My parents live out there. It's college town, Walmart country, cheap prices, high rent.
You must be Luke.
Yeah.
Luke, can you do a quick introduction? You missed the
Yeah.
introduction, but we wanted to call on you because you're somebody who actually has done some of this.
Okay, I'm Luke Rodonis. I just called Scott today for the first time. He introduced me to him. I'm 22 years old, just graduated from the University of Arizona. Started buying rental properties when I was 19. I work as a full-time accountant in Visalia at a human probiotic company, and I'm just looking to grow and network.
Perfect. For the people on Zoom, I want to just reiterate that, maybe toot your horn a little. We have somebody here, his name's Luke. He's joining us from Visalia. He, at 19, already started buying units. You've got how many at this point? How many doors?
I got 10 doors.
He's got 10 doors at 22, so he makes Cade and I kind of look like brand new and near the yard, which is great. We like to put ourselves around people like you. Is there a good way for us to get a hold of you?
Just my phone, email.
Perfect. He'll be around a network, and if anybody needs it, feel free to shoot out to us. We're going to get you in contact.
Sweet. All right, so number 2, how to invest out of state, right? So we all know, there's hype surrounding out of state. Everyone's like, ooh, it's kind of like the shiny diamond in the rough when people mention out of state. But let's talk about actually how this works. So what Scott gave you a little bit of the backstory on how we came to think about investing out of state, but we had to start somewhere, right? And with no MLS access, even though we're agents here, we don't have access to the MLS out in South Bend. We literally just started on Zillow.
Mm-hmm.
We were looking at just listeds, just sold, pendings, looking at stuff for rent to figure out what even rents we're going for, because we weren't connected with any broker or anybody when we first started looking into this. So Zillow was the first big part for us, and I think was a huge resource.
Yeah, we actually were even calling like for sale by owners. We made offers on for sale by owners and things like that. The value here was that we had already narrowed down what market we wanted to be in at that point. We used Zillow to help figure out some of the numbers from prior, but we knew the market was at least solid enough to be looking. This is how we went from picking a city to picking deals. Once we had seen a few of these, we just started calling brokers. And so you had a question about how do you find a good broker? It's just like how you find a good property manager. You just call all of them and you try to interview them and you try to get in front of them, and you work with them until you realize it's not a good fit, and then you go to the next. We didn't have to search too much. We bumped into probably 2 or 3 brokers in 2 or 3 different locations. some in South Bend, we had a couple in Alabama and one in Texas. But we ultimately ended up working with Jen, who's on the call right now, because a good broker is going to tell you a whole bunch. They're going to be on time. They're going to know what they're talking about. They're going to have done deals, and they're going to be actively doing deals in the sense of representing or even doing them themselves. So we were introduced to Jen through Jason. So that's big help. And also she had popped up just through a couple different comments where we had seen her on different areas. So that's how you find a broker. Does that help?
Yeah.
Like just going through calling. That's exactly what we did. And at the start, we actually were just trying to like say, hey, we're out of state, not trying to like hype ourselves up or like make ourselves seem like something we weren't, but just to get in front of them, we were like, hey, we're out of state investors from California, and we're looking to buy a lot of units in the town. And, you know, people react, and you got to just be able to move. And the good thing was we had some experience with how the slang and just like the lingo was on how to talk about rentals. It got us a little bit, but ultimately once we found Jen, it was like she was sending us deals. She was helping us, you know, figure out what rents were going to be, rehabs, things like that. But ultimately, you know, referral is going to be number one source, and then calling through Zillow and chatting with people.
And I think that's the most important thing when finding a broker, right? Is being able to be on the same page with them. They know your goals and they know your expectations. And then there's always that open line of communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took us a couple brokers to be able to get connected and, you know, with the relationship we have with Jen now, but that's one of the biggest things for sure.
Here, hold it before we move across. The other thing is the research is one of the things that takes the most time. So everybody in here pretty much mentioned you have a full-time job. What Kate and I did was we didn't want to get rid of our real estate sales business. The big thing that helped us, and you can do it however you want, but since we were on the East Coast, we knew that their time was 43 hours ahead. We just started coming in earlier, and we found that brokers actually responded a lot better when we called in the morning. And we said, hey, we're from California, we're calling you because they know that California is probably not awake yet. And so those are kind of like little things that we kind of stumbled upon, but it might be something that helps you guys just get in touch with somebody. Is just getting in the grind in the morning before you go to work and calling them, because after work, you're going to have to wait until the next day to get a response. Yeah. Jen, is that fair to say, or yeah?
All right, next slide, which is probably one of the most important slides in this whole presentation, is how to set up your team and how it should be structured. So we touched a lot on having a broker, right? Having the right broker, helping you analyze deals. They've got local market knowledge and help you find new deals, right? So it all starts basically with the broker right here.
Mm-hmm. So your broker is like your deal machine. They're helping you find deals. They're sending you off-market deals. We're not there. So we're not in the same position where you can drive for dollars like you could here. It's really important that you have somebody who's connected in the market and who goes to meetups. Jen's even telling us now when we're coming into South Bend, come in when there's a meetup so I can introduce you to people so we can get things moving. So they're the deal flow, but the bread and butter of anything where you can make money in this business is the property manager. And so your property manager, I think by far is the most important person on the team outside of yourself when it comes to if your deal is going to actually cash flow or not. Because a broker can know the price, they can know the rent, they can know the general expenses, but if you have a bad property manager, it doesn't matter, you're underwater. And so this was the person that we were the most nervous about, and this was one of the big reasons why we went to South Bend, was we had a relationship with somebody who had already been working with our team for multiple years, who had a track record of being on time, you know, who had managed, you know, a large group of people, who was organized, and who was already property managing large numbers of houses. So when you go to out of state, figuring out this person has to be a number one priority before you buy a house, and then also managing this person. So we'll talk about how you manage them, but that person right there is going to make or break your rental portfolio. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed when I was on biggerpockets.com, online real estate investors. I got in contact with some people out in Ohio, and what I was finding out was that a lot of the realtors are also property managers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Because the commission is lower on the lower price homes, they also manage them for investors. So it was kind of easy, but at the same time, it was like, well, now I feel like they have so much part of the deal that who are they really looking out for?
Right.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean,
how have you gone about that? How have you gone about that? Like, how are you researching more property managers?
So I was meeting online with investors who were already investing in that area. Some of them more local, some of them were not. And just asking them how they went about building their team. Who do they talk to when they're looking for deals? Who do they talk to for lending and property management, all these things. And I would just, same thing, just call them and ask.
Yeah.
And just to see, I mean, they tell you all kinds of things like, hey, we know California probably doesn't have this, but you're gonna want, over here, you wanna factor in bed bugs. Every 2 months you want to spray for them because it's very prevalent over here. And we don't think about that kind of stuff over here.
Yeah.
But just things like that, they have the insight, and I was just meeting them all on that bigger pockets.
Yeah.
So.
Mark, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Mark was just sharing, I don't know if you guys can hear it on Zoom. Please let me know if you do so I don't repeat. But Mark was sharing with us that a lot of other areas, their agents and brokers also help property manage. And sometimes it can have adverse effect in the sense that maybe they have a little bit too much in the deal. And so he's going around, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's going around to different meetups in the areas and getting referrals from agents or from investors who are already doing business there. And also he's done a good job of getting tips about things like bed bugs. Where's bed bugs prevalent? Do you remember? Ohio. So in Ohio, he was saying bed bugs are pretty prevalent. Jen can attest to the fact that Kate and I didn't understand it rains over in South Bend, and we didn't realize how important the gutters were going to be on a house. And so that was one of those things that in California you don't think about, but it can make or break a deal as well. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And I want to bring up one of the questions in Zoom that we have from Mike. So Mike says, in my local market, I can look at a deal and know if it is a solid area or not. Do you guys leverage your broker to be the expert on the area, or do you have any advice on how to identify ideal areas within a market to invest? So Mike, thank you for your question. 1,000% yes. We rely on Jen heavily, and we did rely on Jen heavily before, choosing our first deal and our second deal. She, we were actually sending her deals we were finding on Zillow and being like, hey, these numbers pencil out really good. And she would say, that is a very crappy area that you want to stay away from.
Right.
So having a really good broker is 1,000% going to be a great way to be able to identify whether it's zip codes or neighborhoods or areas on where you should invest and are good areas or where you should stay away from.
Yeah. And I hope you guys are seeing the importance of the value of your team. Kate and I immediately knew that the value of the team is going to be more than the value of our knowledge or what we can do. Yeah. And so we've been really blessed to already have been put together with a group of people that are high performing, really, really good at what they do. And we can't stress enough how much we rely on these three people to get the job done. And Jen, if you have anything to say about maybe how a broker can also help, please feel free to chat in there.
And then one point I want to go back to on the property manager. So, we told you guys we had a prior existing relationship with the property manager that we ended up choosing, but just because we had that prior relationship didn't mean we weren't out interviewing other property managers in the area and getting their rates and, looking up their reviews and all that stuff. I think that's especially important to do regardless, right? Because, even though there's that prior existing relationship, it's important to go out and see what else is out there, just so you're making sure you're making the best decision for you.
Yeah. And not to drag on, but the last thing that we did for the property manager is we actually had a long phone call with one of the top property managers here in town, who called us directly and said hey, I hear that you guys are going out there and I hear that you're buying out there. What are you asking your property managers? And he was helping feed us questions okay, what happens if this happens? And what's the lowest cost that they're going to, or what is the threshold for the cost that they're going to either call us at and say, do you want to do this or not? Is it $50? Is it $100? Things like that. And then also, what's the system for getting paid? Yeah.
When you're interviewing these different property managers, what are a couple of questions that you receive various responses?
Rates. Yeah. Rates is huge. We had some people that said that they only charged 5% or 4%. And typically a good, a pretty standard rate is somewhere in that 8 to 10%. Very easily, that's where it's at. Right when we got the people saying 4 or 5%, we immediately crossed them off our list, just with the fact that we can't be working with a discount person if we're out of town. Maybe if you're in town and you just want a little help, that might work. But if we're 2,000 miles across the country, we need somebody who's charging what they know they're worth and who's going to actually crush it.
Yeah, and traditionally with those 4 or 5% property managers, they're marking up everything else that happens that they go in and do, whether it's going in and fixing a leaky faucet, they're going to mark that up 10 times just to be able to make their money back. So it might sound good, 4 and 5% on the outside, but then you got to dive in and ask those deeper questions on hey, what happens if there is a leaky faucet, rates for all that other stuff, which makes that 5% jump up to a lot more than 8 to 10%.
Yeah. And then also for broker and property manager, making sure that specifically the broker, they're people that work with investors. So not like somebody who goes and buys and sells other people's homes that maybe it's just like buy and live in. Right. You want somebody who specializes in knowing like how to talk about a property. Because if they're your eyes, you don't want them to go there and say, yeah, it looked okay. And then you find out like, all these different things are wrong. But you also don't want them to go and necessarily say, oh, it's a bad deal and leave money on the table because they don't understand that maybe this is the condition that this is going to be in. And there's an opportunity to put some money in and get it fixed, right? Last one is contractor. Your contractor obviously is going to save you a lot of money and time, making sure that you vet the contractor, making sure that they work on deals constantly, because ultimately you're going to have to keep them busy. And so you have a deal flow, you have the manager, and then you have the contractor helping repair and get your values up. And if anybody in here is hoping to do like the BRRRR method where you buy, you update, rent, refinance, repeat, the contractor is going to be the biggest delay and the person who makes or breaks whether or not you're going to leave money in the deal. Yeah, fair enough.
And the phrase that we like to use for this group of people down here is your boots on the ground, especially, obviously, since it's out of state, you're not going to be out there 100% of the time. So you're going to be heavily relying on these people, and that's why it's especially important to make sure you're picking the right people for your team.
Our goal here, by the way, is that we don't want to be detached from this completely. We want to be managing only really one person. And in this case, we only really manage our property manager full-time, where we have daily contact with them just about, hey, where's this project at? What can we do here? But the value is that we send off 1 or 2 emails a day max, and she does everything else for us. And then our broker we have constant contact with because she's sending us deals and letting us know, hey, where are we at on offers? Where are we at with this buyer? Do we know of any sellers coming up? Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of times property managers have good contacts with contractors already. So if you're looking at a state, would you ever recommend going through a property manager to find that contact, or would you just go and look for a contractor completely separately?
I would do both. Yeah. So with our property manager, again, she has contacts with the main contractor we're using right now. But again, that we still went out there and we were talking, to networking and calling up all these different contractors and roofers and still going out there and calling everybody and making sure we at least have a list. If our main go-to is busy or we're wanting to get multiple bids on something because we know, our numbers need to be spot on, we have all those other people to fall back on.
Yeah. And just like Kate said, like if something where our scope of business goes out of the realm of some of these people, it's all business. And so we know that we can always go and get referrals on different things. If somebody can't do it, we know that we can go to them and ask for a referral, and then we can also go and do our research ourselves. So we have multiple different options and different threads. Perfect.
All right, next up, which is, another important thing is building confidence, right? So we talked a little bit about all the hype there is out of state, but kind of the flip side of that coin is a lot of people are very, very scared, very hesitant, and very nervous, and rightfully so, about investing out of state because, like we've been talking about this whole time, you can't be out there, right? You can't hop in a car in most cases and be there in an hour or two at the max and be able to do all that. So when starting your journey out of state, it's important to know, and Scott and I can both attest to this, that there's going to be a lot of outside voices telling you, hey, why are you thinking about out of state? You're crazy.
It's too dangerous. There's a lot.
Putting it nicely. So the important thing that we found, and a big thing that Jason has instilled in us too, is surrounding yourself with the right people. And the phrase we like to use is surrounding yourself with people who are doing what you want to do, right? You wouldn't take advice on how to fix a car from a plumber, right? You would take advice on how to fix a car from a mechanic. So if you're looking to invest out of state, you're going to be wanting to surround yourself and take advice from people who are doing that already, right?
Perfect. Sweet. That's all we really want to talk about on the slide. So this is the slide that could save you some serious money. And these are things that we've learned already, but we've learned a lot from other people. And if you have anything to chime in here, please do. Perfect. So the first thing we really want to talk about is the hype. So we looked at a couple different markets because other people told us to look there. Just like we're telling you look at South Bend, please do, by all means, but don't make your decision just because Kate and Scott bought there or just because Jason bought there. Make sure that you do your research. Just like anything else, go look at other places and make a decision based off of the numbers and the facts and not based off of the hype.
Second thing is avoid alligators. So alligator is a term that was coined by Michael Zuber. He's a big investor here in the Central Valley. And he talks about that a lot in his book, One Rental at a Time. An alligator, when the numbers don't work, don't force them to work. Don't force the numbers to work just to say you bought a property out of state, right? You don't want to be feeding that property money every single month. You want the property to be feeding you money. So when the numbers don't work, don't force them to work. You shouldn't have negative cash flow on any of your deals that you purchase.
Yeah, the exact opposite is when you do find a deal, make sure to pull the trigger. Kate and I suffered from this a little bit, being very analytical. We'd find a deal, it'd pencil out, it'd be looking great on there. And, last minute we'd think, maybe not, there's too many other options, we're not. So once you find a market that works, go there. Once you find a deal that works, put in an offer. The worst case scenario is you get in the deal, you find out later that, hey, after doing more research, it doesn't work, and you can back out. But a lot of people get stuck in the, I don't know what market to go to, because there's a whole country to go to, right?
All right, number 4, overpaying. This is kind of, a basic but still important one. We all know we shouldn't overpay for a property, right? It kind of goes back to the same thing. When the numbers don't pencil out, don't buy the deal, right? Don't buy the property. If you're overpaying for it, no matter what your exit strategy is, if it's BRRRR or if you're flipping or whatever, overpaying is the thing that can destroy all of that in a second. And that's why it's important to know your numbers and network with people like a broker who know the numbers of the market.
Yeah. Buying cheap, being cheap, excuse me. Being cheap isn't about the deal. You can be cheap about a deal as long as you're doing deals. The important thing is when you have to spend the money to make things go right, spend the money. Pay for the right broker, pay for the right home inspector, pay for the repairs so that your refinance comes back correct. It's an important thing where sometimes we can get, as investors, a little bit money hungry and pinching the money, when really, if you put $10 in, you can get $100 back. So Cade and I spent $800 to get our first inspections on all of the houses that we bought. And we typically wouldn't do that, but it was the first houses. And we actually got scared out of our mind based off of what came back, because a home inspector's whole job is to point out every detail, down to, he was even calling out like the cracks and the slanting in the soil and saying, oh, this is sloped back towards the house. This is, done wrong. Well, that's great, because when we got to the house, we thought to ourselves, man, this isn't so bad. And we already knew what issues were coming down the pike.
Yeah. And then last but not least, we probably sound like a broken record by now, but don't rush. Scott emphasized the importance of doing your research. I mean, the majority of our time has been spent and will keep being spent by researching and analyzing, right? So analyze deals, run your numbers, and again, don't buy property just to say you own property, right? If the numbers don't work out, wow, you look like a big shot owning a ton of property out of state, but now you're feeding all those properties and you're losing money, right?
Any questions on anything to look out for, anything that you guys have seen? Jay, if you have anything to pitch in as well with your experience. Luke, if you've seen anything as well.
One thing is I got taught by a home inspector, air filters are kind of a big deal. It's something you want to think about, but if you don't change out your air filters in the house or the property manager's not doing that, then it'll cost you $2 or $3 grand to buy a new HVAC system, and you really don't want to do that.
Gotcha.
Usually quarterly on that is kind of an important thing that most people don't think about.
Gotcha. So maintenance on the property and some tips from the home inspector about, cycling out your filters. Jay?
Probably stuff that's unique to whatever market you're gonna buy in. So like in Cleveland and I think in Indiana, where it's like typical that they have basements. Like one of the things that I'm doing is putting gutters on the rentals that I'm buying so that you don't get water flowing into the basement. We don't have basements in California, so you never even think about stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And so like winterizing the house because it snows 3 months out of the year in Cleveland or here we don't, right? So just pick the market and then get information from people that you trust about the issues that are specific to like the properties.
Perfect. Jason was pitching in something about making sure that you are obviously market specific, but in some of the markets he's in, he needs to put in rain gutters like ourselves and winterize the house and make sure that you aren't having problems that you wouldn't think of, and relying on people that you trust to get that information on what you need to do.
Perfect. All right, so number 4, we've got our case study. Our very first deal, which like we were talking about a little bit, was a 4-pack deal. So a little bit of backstory on this before we get into the numbers. So we mentioned we found it on Zillow. The funny thing is we had actually reached out to the listing agent through Zillow to try and get a deal done directly with the listing agent representing us, and he wasn't giving us the time of day at all. So we actually ended up going through Jen. All 4 houses were listed on Zillow for 165 days or something crazy like that, for $160,000 for the 4. And Scott, Jen, and I, we put our heads together. We were talking with her on maybe where we should go in at, because again, going back to overpaying, there's no way we could pay $160 for the 4 and still have the numbers crunch out, right? So we went in, we made our offer at $125 and got it accepted. So we've got those 4 properties. We locked those up at $125 a piece, and then we'll dive into the numbers right here. This is kind of an overview. On the next slide, we'll go line item by line item.
And then can you guys see this on Zoom? Perfect. So these are the current numbers that we have. So we bought these properties using other people's money, meaning that we went through, we have a private lender on this who came through. He brought the capital. We are paying him interest payment. We set that all up, and we're going to do a whole different presentation if this works out on how to do that kind of stuff. But in this situation, it's important to know that we were paying an extra large mortgage for the first 6 months while we waited to refinance it with the bank, and paying cash is what allowed us to get the discount. So our current rents right now as they stand are at $2,800 a month, which feels like a lot, but after the $2,200 in expenses, we only are actually making $575 a month in cash flow. And so this is important to know, because after this step, our numbers go up, and we have to make sure that it's not an alligator in this stage, even if it makes sense in the next stage.
Yeah. All right. So here are the in-depth numbers. Scott was talking a little bit about the private money loan, so just a little bit more info on that. So we borrowed just the purchase price. On our second deal, we actually borrowed a little bit more in order to put that money into fixing the properties. But for these first 4, we borrowed $125. The private money loan is a 6-month term with a free optional 3-month extension, just to make sure we have enough time to get those refinances done.
Do you want to explain what that means?
Yeah. So Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, basically the government, you've got to hold on to a property for 6 months before you can refinance your money out, right? So we're doing all the homework, all the research, networking with banks and credit unions out in South Bend to make sure when it hits 6 months and 1 day, those refinances are ready to go for all 4 of those properties, and we're able to pay our private money lender back. So like Scott was saying as well, the loan is a 10% interest only loan. So we're paying our private money lender 10% interest of the 125 every single month until those properties are refinanced. Like we talked about, monthly income, our rents are at $2,800. Here's kind of the big part that we wanted to go over, which are the monthly expenses. So just first off, that's the big mortgage payment right there, sitting at $1,041.67. So that's the 10% monthly of the 125. This is what we're paying our private money lender every single month. This is basically our mortgage to our private money lender.
So the important thing here is, when you are buying a property, it's important to remember, if you're going to use this strategy, that it has to make sense when you have this payment. Even though when you go and refinance out and it's going to be a 30-year loan and you have a bank holding this, even when it's in a short-term loan, it needs to make you money. So this is one of the big things that can kill a deal. So the easy way to calculate this number is multiply your loan by your interest rate and divide it by 12, right? And so in this case, it's 125 times 0.1 divided by 12 gets you 1041. Each month, our lender makes a little over $1,000, and at the end of the 6 months, they get their $125,000 back. Additionally, there's some points and things like that that you can work in depending on how you negotiate with your lender, but this is the monthly expense. In this deal, we actually had no utilities being paid by us. They were pre-negotiated by the last landlord. We were going to inherit them, and so this saved us some money as well. And in our future leases, we're just going to keep it this way, where the tenants are paying their utilities. It's important. We learned on our second purchase, our second 5-pack, some of the properties weren't disclosed that we necessarily were the utility payers for certain different properties, and it caused some problems. Didn't cause financial problems, more of like logistics, but it's something that you should pay attention to when you do get the leases from the seller when you're in contract.
Next line item we got is insurance. So obviously you're gonna have to have all properties insured, right? So our monthly insurance for these all 4 properties per month is $181.92. And then just like when you're trying to network with a broker or get in contact with the right property manager, it's important to shop around the insurance too, because we shopped around with a couple different people, got some crazy absurd quotes, and then evidently or obviously ended up choosing the one that we pay $181 a month for those first 4.
Yeah, there's also a couple different policies. There's like umbrella policies or master policies that you can work with. The further you get down, this is a way to help get your numbers down as you grow. Property taxes vary based off of the area, so making sure that you work with your broker and looking up on Google kind of what those rates look like and estimating to begin with. And then other monthly expenses, we have $100. So we always try to add a cushion, because at the end of the day, things come up that we don't account for. And so we automatically, before we even look at any of our money, budget for $100 deficit for any unknown reason outside of all of these other purposes. Does that make sense?
Perfect. And so these last 4 line items down here, so we've got vacancies, repairs and maintenance, capital expenditures, and then property management fees. So obviously property management fees are going to vary a little bit. Our property manager charges 10% of the gross monthly rents. So in this case, every month we're paying our property manager $280 to manage the properties, right? And then industry standards that we found for vacancies, repairs and maintenance, and capital expenditures is 5% of rent. So that breaks down to $140 a piece.
Vacancies are for when your house is actually vacant, if there's turnover and things of that sort. Repairs and maintenance are for like leaky toilets, things of that sort, and like getting things actually fixed up. Capital expenditures is what we call for when you don't get paid. Even though there's a tenant maybe in there, it's late, and maybe there is some cost to that. We're always budgeting and padding our numbers to make sure that we're safe.
And so that gives us a grand total monthly cash flow within these first 6 months of the $575.42. With that being said, let's take a look at what the numbers will look like post refinance. So 7 months down the road. Well, now like 4 or 5 months.
4 months,
for
yeah.
us now. Yeah. So we're going to be conservative. We're going to anticipate our rent staying the same, even though we know the rents are under market value, at least for 2 of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look, this is where the biggest change happens, right? The estimated expenses. Those drop down from over $2,000 to $1,800. And then you can see our grand total net cash flow for those 4 properties is going to be a little over $930 after the post refinance.
Yep. So pretty much everything stays the same here, except for the estimated mortgage. And so we can't tell you what our true mortgage payment is yet. We're using numbers that we got from our broker, our mortgage broker out there, who's been hooking us up with rates and things like that and keeping us in the loop. This is the most recent figure that we've had for our first 4 homes. So what that means is that this number goes up very quickly. Now, the one thing that Kate and I wanted to make sure is that we kept these numbers conservative. So there is opportunity for us to increase our rent. And then there's also opportunity for maybe us to get some of our expenses down when we renegotiate leases and things of that sort, making sure that we have, tenants paying different things, right? So there are opportunities for us to make a little more, but conservatively, this is the number that we're actually going to make. The other part that Kate and I really wanted to tell everybody about was that we make $933 a month from these rentals each month after the refinance. But with our partnership, we already agreed we're actually just going to keep all that money in the business. And so it's important that if we're all looking to actually build our future, if you start living your life based off of this $933, you're probably going to end up in a bad spot pretty quickly. And it's important that you actually save that money for a good amount of time and use that for opportunity growth, right?
And another important thing is this is the monthly cash flow when everything's going 100% right? And we know that doesn't happen very often in this business where everything's running smoothly and it's a well-oiled train and everything's going perfect and you're getting that 933 every single month. So we're actually working on getting 2 of those 4 units turned over right now and then increasing those rents. So we're having a little bit of turnover up front. And obviously that means we're not getting the full rent amount right now. We're not getting that full 2,800 because there's no tenants in there, right? So that's also important to note. And then one thing about the mortgage, so talking about how the refinance works a little bit. So we talked with our mortgage broker. Typically, when you refinance, you're able to refinance out 75% of what the home is worth, right? So we were able to get these at a discount. We're gonna be able to put in a little bit of work into them, especially these first 2 that we're having some turnover on. And then that means our ARV, or after repair value, is gonna shoot up, right? So even though we're only gonna be able to get a loan at 75%, we've anticipated that that's still gonna be able to cover our payment back to our private money lender and possibly be able to put a little extra cash in our pocket.
Perfect. Any questions on these numbers? This is really the meat and potatoes of like how the numbers work. Yeah.
We've been looking out of state with some properties that seem to be good deals, and they have some pictures whether there's tenants in them or there's no tenants in them. I think a lot of sellers will try to do their best to put in the bare minimum before they sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's sometimes it limits the amount of work you can do to raise the value. So have you found any trouble in that aspect in terms of like what are you going to do to raise that after repair value?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. One, Kate, to my business model looks more for the distressed properties, not things that are destroyed, but things that have, growth opportunity, or in the sense, add value. And so our business model, we really don't spend a lot of time looking at pretty clean flips and things like that are already done. We really are looking at the seller who's maybe been on the market for a little bit, who's not put all the time and effort into the property, and who knows that maybe they're in a bad spot or that they know that they've got some work to do.
Who's owned the properties for 20 plus years, and obviously they're in livable condition, but are they in great condition? No. Right.
Yeah. And depending on the state or market that you're in, even if the house has some fixed up parts to it, it's important that you realize that you have to buy the price down, right? So you have to get it for the right price. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you actually did the work yourself. You have to have 75%. So if you can find a way, if you become a master negotiator and you can get the price down, because maybe you're buying cash, maybe you're closing quickly, maybe in our case, we're buying 4 houses at once from a seller, which makes his life way easier. Those are things that get your price down. And at the end of the day, if the numbers don't work, just like we said, don't pull the trigger. And if you pull the trigger, you get into the house and you're out there looking at these properties in your first escrow, you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't look right. Make sure that you talk with your broker and pull the plug if it doesn't work. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be stuck in that house in the seller's position trying to sell it and getting low bids because you didn't do enough research or you didn't get the price down enough. And it's going to happen. So it's important that you plan for that house that you buy and it turns into a crap show because you just didn't know. There's always unknowns. Yeah.
What's the first thing you do to build that after repair value to increase it?
So
okay.
That's where it comes down. So, well, first off, we started with Zillow, right? But that's where the biggest piece for us has been Jen, our broker, because she has access to the MLS. She's able to see comps. She knows what the neighborhood's doing. So she's our main resource. We lean on her heavily for those ARV values. And that comes down to, again, choosing a trustworthy broker, right? Someone knows the market, has experience, and you can trust who's cautious and knows the numbers, right?
Yeah. The other part is, depending on where you're at or the market we're in, sometimes there's drive-by appraisals and sometimes there's other things. So like for Kate and me, the exterior is very important to us. We feel like the exterior of the home is going to give not only our renter a sense of pride, but also it helps get the repair value up. It helps get the overall tenant's behavior up. We find that a cleaner rental that you take care of gets taken care of by the renter very often. I'm not going to say it's 100% of the time, but that's the trend that we see. And so when we know that something needs to get done, if it needs to get pressure washed, go pressure wash it. If you get a property and it has the cracked window, go fix the cracked window. Even if it's going to be a little bit, it's worth it because maybe that's enough for your appraiser to say, oh, I don't need to go inside. This is in good shape. $45,000, which for us, $45,000 runs through our head constantly because $45,000 is what we need for us to be $0 into this deal. If we can get all of our properties refinanced at $45,000 after, then we do the 75%, that gets us out for our purchase and rehab. So that's kind of where we're at.
Sweet. Next up is just any more questions. So you guys have any more questions or comments? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was, you might have touched on it a little bit there by splitting about 45. But when you guys do this refinance, are you guys doing it like individually, or is it a jumbo or like a package?
Yeah.
Refinance?
So for the refinance, we've been in limbo, right? So we talk with our broker and we make sure, our mortgage broker, we make sure that we can do the options, right? So we can make sure that we actually can make this refinance. What we're concluding at this point with our current conversation with our broker is that the best rates that we can get are if we divvy these up and refinance them individually. So for us right now, it's looking like that's our best option. After you get past 10 homes, you can't go and get just a normal loan, right? And so, yeah, and so at that point, then you have to start going and being more creative. But for these first purchases, which I'm assuming most of us are probably still in the first 10 outside of Luke and Jason, you know, I'm thinking that that's probably going to be the best way for us. Yeah.
So I think like renting out the property management and your brokers is relatively straightforward. But as far as contractors go, I mean, I think that's the most daunting part, especially if you're looking at a distressed property that needs some instant work. How do you get a contractor on board that's trustworthy and that can give you a relatively nice bid? And then how do you like source it out? Do you have them handle all the materials, or do you kind of give it a check first? Do you order the materials? I mean, how do you handle that?
Right. So in our case right now, we rely heavily on the property manager for that connection with our main contractor. So that goes back to being able to find, like you were saying, right, the trustworthy property manager that you know has the right connections. And in our case, it was helpful, right, because we had those connections already in place. Those contractors had worked on Jason's property that he has out there. So I mean, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it comes down to still being able to have that trustworthy connection and being able to rely heavily on your property manager who knows all these different handymen who are, because they manage they're not just managing your properties, right? They're sending people out to everybody's all the time, right? So they know, and they know and pick and choose who the best ones are, and that's where it's making, you know, a strong and reliable connection to them.
So say you don't have that. Oh, Jay, go first.
I was gonna say, if you don't know people, you have to, the best way that I have found is to get referrals. And so that means you have to go ask. And there's a lot of like bigger pockets and Facebook Marketplace and all these different groups and everything. There's tons of free resources where if you're willing to put yourself out there and just go and burn up the phones and call as many people as you can and direct message as many people as you can, and just like, that's what we did when we first went to Indiana. We bought a ticket 2 weeks before we went out there. And I spent 2 weeks setting up meetings with everybody that would take a meeting with me. And for 2 days straight, it was just back to back to back to back meetings with brokers and property managers and contractors. And that's how I met Jen. And that's how I met the 3 contractors that we ended up trying out. And 2 of them were us, frankly. And one of them we had to fire, I think, on the job because he was so bad. You know what I mean? And so I think you've got to get people you got to meet people, then you've got to go like meet them in person, see if you have kind of a good vibe and some synergy, then try them out and keep them on a very short leash at the beginning. And if it doesn't feel right, then you've got to cut ties. You know what I mean? And there's going to be a little bit of like gray area there, and you just have to be okay with that. You're never going to know all of the stuff like right out of the gate. If you're waiting to have every puzzle piece in place, you're never going to pull the trigger on stuff. You know what I mean?
So you mentioned short leash, being out of state. Or how would that? How would you?
What I would do is set very strict guidelines from the beginning, and set like on how payments are going to be released, how they're going to communicate like milestones throughout the project, and how they're getting stuff done. But with this, man, it makes it really easy. Like, you should be able to send me video and pictures every single day. We should be able to have at least a weekly or 2 times a week, like FaceTime, where you're at the property and you're walking me through the property and you're showing me exactly what you did this week before I press a button and send you any money. And if they're hesitant to do that, then I would already feel kind of like, you know what, maybe that this situation is not the right thing. You know what I mean? And some of them are like, maybe they're more old school and they're not tech savvy and they're not whatever, and that they may not be the right fit for you on the first one, especially if you're trying to manage it from 2,000 miles away. But it takes work, you know what I mean? And it takes kind of like getting in there, and you've got to start with a longer list, whittle it down, and then whittle it down some more, and then roll the dice on some people and see how it works out. And, you know, hopefully everything works out great, and then give them some more work and just keep trying.
I should have recorded that. I'm going to try to reiterate what Jason just said in a pretty concise way. And if you have questions, Jason can rattle that back off to you guys another day as well. But the general concept is that if you don't have a contractor already set up, there's a few ways that you can get started. And one is starting off with a big list and working your way down, and setting it up in a sense that you're going to have to take some gambles, but keeping a very close eye. And so Jason brought up the fact that we're in this era, we have phones, being on a FaceTime with people, being on Zoom, walking through the property, not sending money or setting up the guidelines so that they get paid once they can prove that they've done their work. That's going to help protect you from getting taken advantage of. Another part is referrals, and also making sure that you go out to the different markets that you're in. And so ultimately, it's important that you go out to the market and meet people in person as well, and also leverage other people who are out there already and go that direction. And then once you get to a point like where Cade and I are, where we maybe have a reference or you have somebody that's in there, start branching out and start touching on different contractors to do smaller jobs, and start small and work their way up, because then you're going to build that trust with those contractors, and they're going to know your expectations and how you communicate and how your workflow is, and you're going to know theirs. Did I miss anything, Jay?
Nope. Sweet. Okay, we had a question in the Zoom. How did Scott and I structure our partnership? So, yeah, it was all fun and dandy when we came up with this idea out in the parking lot at 7 p.m. after a workday, right? But how did we know and how are we confident in our ability to have a business partnership, right? Because it's no little thing to own 9 properties and have, $200,000-$300,000 worth of debt with somebody that you're not going to be compatible with, right? So the first thing that I would recommend for any of you to read before entering a partnership,
considering one.
Yeah, even before considering a partnership. And I think a good book just to read in general is called Rocket Fuel. So Rocket Fuel, it kind of breaks down 2 different types of people, right? You've got the visionary and you've got the integrator. And the reason why Scott and I work so well is Scott heavily leans more visionary and I heavily lean more integrator, right? So the book,
I'll explain what that means. That means that Scott comes up with dumb ideas constantly and talks a lot, and Cade makes stuff happen and also tells me when I have a dumb idea. That's like a very quick solution on how that looks.
Yeah, and so the book talks about the ideal partnership is making sure you bring together a visionary and an integrator, and also that it's the right integrator for the right visionary. So that's how we kind of structured our partnership in the first place. We touch base, like Scott says, every morning. We come in early at 6:30. We touch base about what we've got going on out in Indiana. We touch base on a personal level on, hey, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Am I going to need to pull some more slack today because, you got something going on? So it's having that open line of communication that's really helped us.
Yeah. And like on that level for that conversation, every morning, we don't hit it every morning now, but it's not because we're intentionally doing it. It's because sometimes we just forget. But doing what we call a level 10 meeting, where every day, one of the first things that we do is first talk about what we need to get done before 8 o'clock. But then 2 is touch base on like a personal level, like, hey, like today is going to be a hard day for me for X, right? Like I got in a car accident yesterday and I'm still kind of thinking about that. Great. What can we do to make that resolve, right? And what can we do to make sure that we don't drop the ball, right? Because ultimately we have different obligations. And so Cade's obligations are more on the financial and the communication on like the nitty gritty stuff. Whereas some of the stuff I'm doing is more like, hey, where are we going next? What are we doing on this big picture thing? How am I getting these relationships with private money lenders to get people to give us thousands of dollars, right? And so some days I'm not fit to do my job and Cade's more fit, and we kind of do some reversing. But it takes a lot of communication, and every day we get up early, even though we don't want to, and we come in and we talk and we get that done. It's the first thing we do because it's honestly probably the hardest. Does that answer your question? I know we rambled a little bit, but that book, Rocket Fuel, legitimately made the partnership outline for how we were going to run this. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
You typically talk to private money lenders before you reach out to certain brokers in different areas?
No. Typically, I'm doing everything at the same time. And the concept is that I don't want to go to a private money lender and say I have a deal and that be the first time I talk to somebody. To me, it's more important that I built a relationship, because at the end of the day, I'm a man of my word. I have to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do, or how I'm going to do it, and then do it, right? And so for me, all of my private lenders that I'm working with right now have watched me on an intimate level getting business done in the local market. And now they're seeing me going and doing it out of other places. And they're seeing Kay do the same thing. And so at this point, even Kate's bringing in people, and he's not even trying to talk to private money lenders. They're coming to him. And so it's important that, you know, you can look at different markets, but there's always going to be somebody who has an appetite for risk when there's reward. And in this business, when you can make a 22% ROI on a 6 month or on a loan for 6 months, you have 22%. And if I can keep turning that each 6 months, there's going to be somebody who has 150,000 that thinks, you know what, the risk's worth it. Worst case scenario, I end up with a few properties out there and I'll just sell it. But yeah, we try not to wait just for one hiccup to go. We do everything at once and we build kind of the plane as we're going. And at this point, we have a model that we know is working. And so now we know, like, okay, if we have the right deal, people will buy. If you build it, they will come.
Question from the Zoom too. Someone had asked if we have an official LLC as of right now. So as of right now, we do not have an official LLC. All the properties are owned jointly in our individual names. And the second half to that question is, if not, when? We've been talking
yesterday.
Yeah, we're a little late on the ball on that, but we've been talking. We're getting everything dialed in order to set up like an official corporation that houses all the properties. We just want to make sure we work through all of those logistics correctly before, you know, flying in guns blazing and not knowing anything.
Yeah, the second part to that is when you have a partnership where your general partners are kind of just two people in one situation where you don't have an LLC set up already. A lot of the times it's kind of handshaky and it's like, oh yeah, like if you need money and we need to sell, I totally will. It's important that you set up the LLC and you set up bylaws and you talk with an attorney and you have the worst case scenario written out. One of the things Kate and I haven't talked a lot about is right behind research, we have talking about the worst case scenario on the amount of time we've spent. And so we've spent a lot of time sitting down and talking about if our rents don't come in, if this property has this issue, if one of us goes through a situation where we need money, what does that look like? And so building out all of those pipelines for what's going to happen and building that out in a way that now we can go to an attorney and say, these are kind of where we're at. What are your suggestions? And going to people that we know that are in partnerships that make sense and saying, hey, how did you handle this situation? Or how did you write your bylaws in this sense? So that's kind of like a long answer of why we're at where we're at. Yeah. Any other questions or anything? Yeah.
You're kind of going back to the private money.
Yeah.
I know I've seen Jason's post before, and I know he's got a relatively large amount of investors that are ready to move. And I'm sure you guys do too now. I mean, you guys are moving and doing a lot of things out of state. The benefits are clearly there. I mean, you can offer cash price, get a discount on bulk buys, or are there any other factors that kind of make you guys geared towards private money, or is it just to preserve capital, or are there any other things that make you decide private instead of regular finance?
Really, all the benefits start at the beginning. And there's more than just that. It's a sense that there's going to be a day where I want to do a $10 million deal. And I don't really foresee me having 10 million cash in one deal as being a great idea. So working with people and knowing that there's going to be kind of a growth curve to that relationship is important as well. On the finance side, it's important that you know that, like, at the end of the day, having cash on hand as the investor who owns the properties is important. And helping somebody else make money actually ultimately leads to me getting more stuff, right? There's like the concept that if you give out freely or if you help people reach their goals, it always comes back. And Jason's been a big part of this and understanding that, like, this is a tried and true method that we know that if you can help, your Uncle Joe, who works in his job in the Bay Area and kind of is slaving away there, and he's willing to give you some money and you go to a property and then you bring him money back, you never know what he's going to bring back to you now. And you, without having to do anything, manage to help brighten his future. That's kind of the big concept with us, is that it leads to a growth pattern that just ultimately kind of rockets you and all the people around you towards the top.
I'll extend on that a little bit more so on the financial side, right? Because, you know, when you utilize private money and we borrowed the full purchase price, like Scott was saying, I mean, the plan is for us to have very little money into the deal. If we go, and the way that we want to scale and plan for our future, we're not going to be able, we don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars with traditional financing to put 5, 10, 20% down on every single deal that we go out and buy. We're going to be very cash poor very, very quickly, and not have any reserves if anything goes wrong with those, right? So that's another, at least on the financial level, and growth level, like Scott was saying, to go with.
How much are we into 9 properties right now?
9 properties combined between the two of us, we're a little over $5,000.
So I think we did the math, it's like $600 each for properties. That right now we're making $575 a month before we refinance on this first deal, and our other deal's even crazier than that. So we already have made back in 1 month's rent what we put into each property, and so it's pretty absurd in the sense that you can do stuff that you'd never be able to do if you try to do conventional financing. Now, conventional financing does help us get to our future, right? We have to refinance out, but it's important that we start by getting that discount, getting our feet wet, and moving forward that way. Sweet. Just gonna check the Zoom. Any other questions from you guys on Zoom or in person? Yeah.
Who did you guys have draw up the note for the private money? Is it an attorney?
We have an attorney, yep, and he was referred by our escrow, or in this case, it was a title company. And so the attorney was referred to us, and it's pretty simple, and it was, I think, 8 pages for there, and it spells out pretty much everything, just like if you had a normal mortgage. And we are able to even make sure that you have that conversation with your lender and you say, look, here's everything, and it's going to be notarized. Everything's going to be in place. We're not fly-by-night people saying, hey, can you give me $125,000? We're going to shake your hand and we promise we're going to pay you back, right? Yeah.
Sweet.
That's it. It looks like pretty much the last thing is if you guys have any questions or concerns, if you guys want to talk more or want to go get lunch and chat about it, Cade and I are open books. We want to learn more from you guys. And if there's anything else that we can do, we are hoping to do a few more of these events. And as COVID kind of starts tailing off, we're hoping to have more people in person going from there.
Sweet.
All right, guys.
Awesome.
That's pretty much it.
Thanks everybody in Zoom. If you guys have any last minute questions, shoot them in the chat. We also gave out a hard copy of our spreadsheet that we use to analyze our deals. So if you guys would like a copy of that spreadsheet, just shoot us an email, pursuitofproperty@gmail.com. I'll type it in the chat.
Perfect.
Sweet. Thank you guys.
All right.
Good job, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Jen said she's coming to Fresno in the spring. Woohoo! I have it in writing. This is recorded. All right. Yeah, here, I'll show you where it's at.